My mother-in-law gave me 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You, froze when I read it. I'm Renly, 34, female, a licensed occupational therapist in Columbus, Ohio, who has spent the better part of 6 years building a life with a man I love completely, inside a family that never fully accepted me being there. I'm methodical by training. My entire profession is built around assessing situations accurately, identifying what's functional and what's broken, and developing a plan. I say that because it's relevant. Because when my mother-in-law handed me a bound, printed, laminated 11-page document titled 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You, at what I thought was a birthday brunch, my occupational therapist brain did something very specific. It did not panic. It did not cry. It read the document carefully, from page 1 to page 11, while she sat across the table with the triumphant posture of a woman who believed she had just won something. She had not won anything. What she had done was hand me the single most useful document I would receive in 6 years of dealing with her. She had itemized, organized, and laminated her entire strategy. She had numbered it, 47 Reasons, double-spaced, with a cover page. I am a woman who works with structured assessments for a living. She handed me a structured assessment of herself, and she expected me to crumble. I turned to page 1. I started reading, and I watched her expression change from triumph to something she was not prepared for. The realization that I was not going to give her the reaction she had rehearsed for. But let me back up. Because the document was the end of something that had been building for 6 years, and you need the foundation before you get the collapse. I met my husband at a work conference in Chicago when I was 27. He was presenting on adaptive technology in rehabilitation settings, which overlapped with my field enough that we ended up in the same breakout session, then the same dinner table, then the same hotel lobby bar until midnight talking about research methodology and whether Chicago deep dish was pizza or a casserole. He was warm and funny and precise in the way that people who are genuinely good at their jobs are precise. I knew by the end of that week that he was someone I wanted in my life. He told me about his mother on our 4th date. He said, "I need to be upfront with you. My mother is the most important person in my life, and she has opinions about everyone I date. Strong ones." I said, "Okay, what kind of opinions?" He said, "She has a lot of love to give, and she aims it with a very narrow focus." I said, "That sounds like a kind description of something difficult." He said, "It is." I appreciated the honesty. I did not fully appreciate the scope. His mother was a woman who had raised him alone after his father died when he was 11, a genuinely difficult circumstance that produced in her a ferocity of protectiveness that had calcified over the years into something less like love and more like ownership. She had been the center of his emotional world for his entire childhood, and the idea that another person might occupy any portion of that center was something she processed as a threat. I understood this clinically from the first meeting. What I underestimated was how far she was willing to go to act on it. The first year was friction, which I expected. She made comments about my cooking at holiday dinners, not mean, just comparative. My son always loved my pot roast. Did he mention that? She asked questions about my career with a particular inflection that framed occupational therapy as a lesser choice. "Oh, you work with older people. That must be draining." She kept my husband on every text she sent me, which I eventually understood was not a communication habit but a surveillance system. She wanted him to see every interaction in case she needed to invoke it later. By year 2, the comments were more pointed. She told my husband, in a conversation he relayed to me, that she worried I was too independent to be a good wife. She said this as if independence were a character flaw, which told me everything about the architecture of what she wanted for her son. She started making plans that involved him without consulting me first. Family trips, holiday commitments, weekend dinners, and then presenting them to both of us simultaneously, so that my declining felt like an objection to the family rather than a scheduling conflict. My husband handled these situations imperfectly. He loved his mother. He understood on some level what she was doing, But the emotional debt he felt toward her, the years she had carried them alone after his father died, made him consistently pull his punch in any direct conversation with her. He would smooth things over. He would find the compromise. He would tell me afterward, "She means well, she's just scared of losing me." I said every time, "I know, but the behavior still has impact regardless of the intent." He knew I was right. He moved slowly. I let him move at his pace, because I understood the dynamic and because I loved him enough to give him time to find his footing in it. What I did during this period was document. Not obsessively, not with any plan in mind. I documented the way I document client progress, dates, specific incidents, exact language where I remembered it. My husband was aware I kept notes. I was not hiding it. It was just how my brain processed things. By year 3, she had escalated to tactics I want to describe precisely because they were not subtle and they were not accidental. She called my workplace twice, not to speak to me, to ask questions about my schedule that she framed as just coordinating. My supervisor mentioned the calls to me, puzzled because my mother-in-law had introduced herself as family and asked what time I finished on Fridays. I asked my husband about it. He asked his mother. She said she was trying to plan a family dinner. My husband told her to coordinate through him directly. She agreed and then did it a third time, calling on a day she knew I had a difficult caseload to ask my front desk if I was available to speak. I was with a patient. She left a message saying it was important. The message, when I called back, was about a recipe. She went through our social media presence looking for content she could contextualize negatively, and she found a photo from a bachelorette weekend I had attended. A group photo at a bar, nothing remarkable, women in their 30s having dinner and drinks, and she texted it to my husband with the caption, "Is this the kind of thing she does when you're not around?" He showed me the text. I looked at it. I said, "She sent you a photo of a dinner party and framed it as evidence." He said, "I know." I said, "What are you going to do?" He said he would talk to her. He did. She apologized to him, not to me, and then sent me a text the next day that said, "I hope I didn't upset you, I was just concerned." No acknowledgement of what the concern was about. No admission that she had tried to plant a seed. Just performed softness over actual sharpness. Year 4, she started working on my husband's brother and sister-in-law, his older brother, who lived in Cincinnati, and whose wife had somehow managed to build a functional relationship with my mother-in-law over 12 years. She called his sister-in-law multiple times over a 2-month period, and, according to the sister-in-law who told me about it later, spent those calls cataloging grievances about me. She said I was cold. She said I was keeping her son away from the family. She said she had concerns about my priorities. The sister-in-law, to her credit, told me about these calls directly and said, "I want you to know I didn't engage, but I thought you should know it was happening." I thanked her. I added it to my notes. Year 5 was quieter in a way I did not trust, and I was right not to trust it. She was planning something. I could feel the stillness of it, the way certain patients go very quiet right before they tell you something they've been holding for months. She was holding something. I didn't know what. And then came year 6, and the birthday brunch, and the document. My husband's birthday is in April. His mother proposed a birthday brunch at her house. Just family, she said. His brother and sister-in-law, his aunt, and us. I said, of course. I brought flowers. I drove. His mother met me at the door, which she did not usually do, and she had an expression I can only describe as prepared. Not hostile, prepared. The way someone looks when they've rehearsed what they're about to do and they're committed to executing it exactly as rehearsed. We sat down at the table. His brother and sister-in-law were there. His aunt was there. My husband was in the kitchen helping with coffee, which I realized later had been engineered. She had asked him to handle the coffee specifically to get him out of the room at the right moment. She reached under the table and placed a document in front of me. It was in a clear plastic sleeve. It had a cover page. The cover page read, in printed bold font, 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You. I picked it up. She said, I think it's time we were honest. The table went very quiet. His sister-in-law made a sound. His brother looked at the document and then at his mother with an expression that said he had not known this was coming. I opened to page 1. Here is what I want to tell you about reading that document at that table, because the way I read it matters. I did not read it the way she expected me to read it, with rising panic, with tears, with the destabilized energy of a person being ambushed. I read it the way I read clinical assessments. Methodically, from the top, with a mental framework already forming around what I was seeing. The 47 reasons were organized into categories. She had actually created categories. There was a section on what she called relational failures, things like does not initiate calls to family members and has missed 4 family dinners in 6 years. There was a section on value misalignment, things like does not prioritize extended family above personal schedule, and has expressed opinions contrary to family tradition at holiday gatherings. There was a section she titled Character Concerns that included, among other items, maintains documentation of family interactions, which meant she had found out about my notes, almost certainly through my husband mentioning it. She had also included, in the Character Concerns section, a reference to a conversation I had with my husband's therapist, a couples therapist we had seen for 4 sessions in year 3 to improve communication. She had somehow obtained awareness of the subject matter of those sessions. I did not know how, but the implication was direct. She had access to information from a therapeutic context that should have been private. I finished page 11. I set the document down. I looked at her. She was watching me with an expression that had been expecting tears or anger and had received neither, and the uncertainty of that was beginning to show around her eyes. I said, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, "Of course." I said, "Did you consult with anyone before you created this?" She said, "I've been thinking about it for a long time." I said, "I mean legally. Did you consult with anyone about the legal implications of documenting and distributing accusations about a person's character within a family context?" She said, "This is a private family matter." I said, "You've distributed a document containing specific characterizations of my behavior, my values, and my character to witnesses at a table. I want to make sure you understand what that is." She said, "I have a right to my opinion." I said, "You have a right to your opinion. The document you created goes beyond opinion. Several of these items contain factual assertions that I can demonstrate are incorrect. And one item, the reference to my therapeutic conversations, describes knowledge that could only have been obtained in a way that raises serious questions." The table was completely silent. I said, "I'm going to step outside and call my husband in. And then I'm going to take this document with me, because it's been given to me and it's mine now." I picked up the document. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen doorway and I said my husband's name. What happened next was not a scene, because I did not make a scene. But it was a reckoning, and it happened in stages over the following weeks, and I want to walk through every stage because each one mattered. Stage 1. The immediate aftermath. My husband came out of the kitchen, read the document in about 7 minutes at the table, while his mother watched and his brother stared at the floor, and then put it down and said to his mother, in the quietest voice I had ever heard him use, "You need to explain to me how this happened." She said, "I did this for you." He said, "No, you did this for you. And I need you to understand that you have made a decision tonight that has consequences for our relationship. Not just with my wife, with me." She said, "You'll thank me eventually." He said, "We're leaving." We left. He drove. We were both quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The therapy thing. How did she know about the therapy?" I said, "I don't know. I want to find out." He said, "So do I." Stage 2. The investigation. The couple's therapist we had seen was, and is, a licensed professional counselor in Ohio, bound by state confidentiality statutes, and HIPAA adjacent professional ethics standards. Unauthorized disclosure of therapy content is a reportable ethics violation with the Ohio Counselor, Social Worker, and Marriage and Family Therapist Board, and potentially a civil matter depending on circumstances. I called the therapist's office on a Monday. I explained, as factually as possible, that specific content from our sessions had appeared in a document created by a family member, and I asked whether there had been any contact from anyone regarding our case. The therapist called me back personally. She was audibly disturbed. She said there had been no contact from anyone, no release had been signed, no information had been shared. She asked me to describe what I had seen in the document. When I did, she said, "I want you to know that nothing from our sessions left this office." I said, "Then the knowledge came from somewhere else." After I got off the phone, my husband and I compared notes about who could have known the specific things his mother had referenced. The list was short, and it led, eventually, to a single conversation my husband had with his brother approximately 2 years prior, a conversation in which my husband had mentioned, briefly and in general terms, that we had tried couples counseling. The brother had apparently relayed this to the mother, and the mother had constructed an implication around it that was more specific than the information she actually had. It was not a privacy breach in the clinical sense. It was family gossip weaponized into a written accusation. That distinction mattered legally. It also mattered to me personally, because it meant the document's character concern section was built on inference and implication rather than actual information, which made the whole construct even less defensible than it had first appeared. Stage 3. The consultation. I consulted with a family law attorney, not because I was considering any specific legal action, but because I wanted to understand my options clearly before deciding anything. This is the way I operate. Information first, decisions second. The attorney reviewed the document and told me several things. First, in Ohio, a document of this nature distributed to third parties could potentially support a defamation claim if specific false statements of fact could be proven, but the standard for family communications in a quasi-private setting is applied carefully and the practical barriers are significant. Second, some items in the document might constitute harassment under Ohio's civil harassment statutes if a pattern could be demonstrated, particularly given the workplace calls. Third, the document itself, created by my mother-in-law and voluntarily given to me, was admissible evidence of her conduct in any future legal proceeding where her behavior was relevant, including, hypothetically, a proceeding involving my marriage. I said, "I'm not planning to divorce my husband." She said, "I know, but I want you to understand that she has documented herself. Every specific claim she made in that document is a record of what she was willing to do and say in pursuit of this outcome. That doesn't expire." I left with a clear picture and a plan. Stage 4. The response. I wrote a letter, not to my mother-in-law, to the family, to my husband's brother and sister-in-law, who had been present, to his aunt, who had been present, addressed to each of them individually, hand-delivered by my husband, which he agreed to without hesitation. The letter was 2 pages. It was not emotional. It was factual. I addressed each category of the document directly. The relational failures section. I included a calendar-based record of every family event I had attended or missed over 6 years, with reasons for absences where relevant. 4 missed dinners in 6 years, as she had documented, against 47 attended. I included it without comment. The numbers spoke. The value misalignment section. I responded to each item specifically, noting which assertions were characterizations of difference rather than evidence of failure, and which were factually incorrect. The character concerns section. I addressed the documentation item directly. I said that I kept professional notes on significant interactions as a matter of occupational habit, and that this practice had been disclosed to my husband, who was aware of it and had raised no objection. I said that keeping accurate records of interactions is not a character flaw. I said that the reference to therapeutic content was based on second-hand inference, not actual knowledge, and that I had confirmed with our therapist that no information had been disclosed from our sessions. The last paragraph of the letter said, "I am sending this because each of you was present when this document was given to me, and I believe you deserve a factual response to what you witnessed. I am not asking for anything from you. I am providing the record." The brother called my husband the next day. He said, "I didn't know she was going to do that. I want you to know I told her afterward that it was wrong." The sister-in-law texted me. The letter was the most dignified thing I've ever seen anyone do in response to something like that. "I'm sorry you had to." The aunt sent a card. Handwritten. It said, "I have known your mother-in-law for 40 years. What she did was not acceptable. You handled it with more grace than she deserved." Stage 5. The conversation with my mother-in-law. My husband handled this because it was his relationship and his responsibility, and he had finally, after 6 years of gentle compromises and pulled punches, arrived at the place where he understood that his mother's behavior was not something he could continue to absorb on my behalf. He met with her alone. I know what was said because he told me directly when he got home, and because he is someone I trust completely. He told her that the document was the end of a pattern he had accommodated for too long. He said that the workplace calls, the social media message, the coordinated conversations with his brother's wife, and now the laminated document. These were not individual incidents. They were a campaign, and he was naming it as a campaign. He told her that his marriage was not a negotiation, that I was his partner and his family, and that family meant something different than what she had always defined it to mean. It was not a structure that orbited her, it was something he and I had built together. He told her that he loved her and that she was his mother, and that neither of those things were in question. But he said clearly and without pulling the punch this time, "If you cannot treat my wife with basic respect, you will have a relationship with me that reflects that choice. Not as punishment, as consequence." She cried. She said she had only ever wanted to protect him. He said, "I know, but I'm not 11 years old anymore, and I don't need protection from my wife." She did not respond to the letter I sent to the family. She did not call me. For 3 weeks there was silence. Then she called my husband and asked if she could call me directly. He said that was my decision. He told me. I said yes. She called on a Sunday afternoon. She did not fully apologize. I want to be honest about that, because a full apology would require a level of self-awareness she has not yet reached. What she said was, "I went too far. I know I went too far." And then she said, "I don't want to lose my son." I said, "You're not losing your son. You've never been losing your son. That was always the misunderstanding." She was quiet. I said, "What I need from you is straightforward. Treat me like a person who belongs in his life, because I do. Not like a problem to be solved." She said, "I can try." I said, "That's all I'm asking." The document is in a folder in my home office, filed by date, like everything else I document. My husband knows it's there. It's not there because I'm waiting to use it. It's there because it happened, and it is real, and the record of what people are willing to do matters, not just in the moment, but over time. My mother-in-law and I have dinner together approximately once a month now. The dynamic is not warm. It is functional and honest, which is more than it was for 6 years of performed warmth over actual hostility. She made a document to end my marriage. What she made, instead, was a record of herself, organized, numbered, laminated, that clarified every dynamic that had been murky, galvanized my husband into the directness he had always been capable of, and confirmed for every family member who witnessed it exactly who had been the unreasonable party for 6 years. 47 reasons. She gave me 47 reasons, bound and laminated. The irony, which I did not mention to her because some things don't need to be said out loud, is that a document that thorough is the kind of thing you only create when you're desperate. And desperation, in my professional experience, means the person creating it already knows they're losing. She was already losing, she just didn't know it yet when she handed it to me. Okay, here's the question burning in my mind. When my mother-in-law slid that laminated 11-page document across the table with a cover page titled 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You, what would you have done in that exact moment? Would you have stood up and walked out before reading page 1? Would you have passed it directly to your husband without opening it? Or would you have done what I did? Sat there, read every single page front to back in complete silence, and then calmly asked her if she had consulted a lawyer first. Because I have genuinely been told by 3 separate people that reading it calmly was the wrong move, and that I should have thrown it back across the table. And every time someone says that, I think about the look on her face when she realized I wasn't going to give her the reaction she'd scripted, and I become more certain I made exactly the right call. Drop it in the comments. I want to know what you would have done with page 1 still in your hand. And if you've ever been handed a laminated case against your own existence and responded by building a cleaner case for yours, subscribe. This is where people who document everything, respond in writing, and let the record speak for itself come to feel thoroughly understood.